time is 10:30. The interview is with Mr. Joe Burton. My name is Charles Jackson, and we are in the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's the place of the interview, and this is being recorded. There's one other thing that I have always done that they don't say, and I think we do. Do we have your permission to record this interview?
Absolutely.
That's important. All right, then we will start with you. If you will, give us your full name and spell your last name.
My full name is Joseph Alfred Burton, B-U-R-T-O-N.
And you go by the name of Joe.
I go by the name of Joe.
Will you tell us when and where you were born?
I was born on Campbellton Road in Atlanta, Georgia. In August the 30th, 1923.
And what were your parents' names?
My mother's name was Lillian Stroop Burton.
Stroop was her maiden name?
Was her maiden name, and it's spelled S-T-R-O-U-P-E.
And your father?
Was Louis, L-E-W-I-S, L-O-U-I-S, excuse me. L-O-U-I-S, Albert Burton. His grandfather, Albert Burton, fought in the Battle of Atlanta.
And what was his occupation?
He was, my father's occupation was an attorney at law.
And you all lived on Campbellton Road?
That's where I was born.
Where you were born.
But I had many addresses on the way up the line because my parents were divorced at a very early age, at my very early age. I think it was around 3 years old.
So where did you go to grade school?
I went to grade school. I started at Simpson Street School right near Georgia Tech. That has, of course, been torn down and everything for the freeway system and the bypasses and so forth. I went from there to North Carolina, where my mother took us, and I went through the 4th grade up there. I came back to Atlanta and went to J. Allen Couch School. I was skipping grades along the line, and I went from there to O'Keefe High School. We moved to East Lake, and I went to Murphy High School. And I went from Murphy High School to Commercial High School.
But you graduated from Murphy?
No, I did graduate from Murphy. It was a junior high. And I went to Commercial High as a senior high school, and that was, of course, a business management school and so forth. And my only distinction there was I took all the courses.
And you graduated from Commercial?
Yes, sir.
Did you go to college?
I went briefly to the Georgia Evening College, trying to get some credits to go to the University of Georgia at the School of Forestry. And of course, when Pearl Harbor was bombed while I was attending there, that was the end of it. I was working as a civilian at Fort McPherson with the 4th Corps Area Signal Office. And I learned some things there that helped me later on. For instance, they had civilians there learning the Morse code and other things in order that if the soldiers were all pulled out, at least we could continue taking over positions there. And after Pearl Harbor, my brother was already in service. He was part of the Georgia National Guard, and so I signed up, but I wasn't sworn in until Friday the 13th of '42, along with the mayor of Atlanta, Roy Lee Krull. I went in as a private. He went in as a colonel, and I thought that was quite a distinction, being sworn in that night.
And you enlisted then? You were not drafted?
Oh, I enlisted, yes, sir.
In what branch of service?
Well, in the Army, and I asked for assignment to the Army Air Corps, and I did get some recommendations from my employers at Fort Mac, Major Berry and Colonel Spencer.
Where'd you get your basic training?
My pre-flight training.
I meant before that even.
I didn't have any.
Okay.
My first shot was when I was recalled to active duty. Of course, they had us stand aside after we were sworn in, and I think it was almost 2 months before I was ordered to report to Maxwell Field, where I took my pre-flight training. And of course, they tested us for everything under the sun, like lining up little, checking your depth and everything. And I went through with flying colors, of course. And then they tested our aptitude for what kind of a career we wanted as a flyer. And I chose to be a pilot, or my second choice was navigation. And third choice would be a bombardier. Of course, it wound up where I did go to pilot training after I graduated from pre-flight school. I went to pilot training down at a place called Avon Park, Florida. That's near Lake Wales. And I trained in the Stearman trainer, primary trainer. And I made a bad, I soloed, but right after that, as I was landing and taking off, I made a little error in judgment. And I pushed that stick a little too far forward, and the plane flipped over. And here I was with the plane upside down with me in there. And so I knew then the jig was up. After they didn't send me off to gunnery school or anything like that. They immediately sent me up to Nashville for reassignment. And this was a picture. This was a picture of me as a cadet in. This is a picture of me as a cadet in Nashville, right here. My wife does a great job of expanding pictures. The lady I'm sitting next to is not in the picture, but she was a very, very fine young lady, and that was just the date I managed to get to go out to dinner one evening. And but anyway, after the Armistice Day Parade, or what's now the Veterans Day Parade, which I marched in Nashville, then I was reassigned to Selman Field at Monroe, Louisiana, and in the School of Navigation. And I worked hard there, and of course we were to be trained as celestial navigators. No matter what kind of body we were over or what kind of storm we had, if we came out, we could see the stars. And later on, I was actually going to experience exactly the kind of thing. I worked every evening. I worked hard and tried to be as precise as I could, because I knew that not only the lives of our people depended on it, but later on, when I went across the Atlantic, I had 3 of the B-25s that had no navigators, and they hardly knew what a sunline landfall was. And but anyway, my crew was real pleased with me, because on my ETA we were right over the runway, and we saw it from a good distance off, coming right into it. But when you go past the point of no return and you're out there with that Atlantic Ocean and everything looks the same, you better look up and see how the Lord can help you with a heavenly body or something. But
one question, can I interrupt just a minute? You have given us good places on everywhere except for those who don't know it. Where was Maxwell Field?
Maxwell Field is Montgomery, Alabama. It is now a more prestigious location. And while I'm mentioning Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama, I may point out that my commanding officer of the 57th Bomb Wing, who had a great history in the field of aviation, has his plane chalked up there near the Officers Club. And if anyone who hears this wants to know about it, he has 74 bombs on the side of his plane, along with a little image on there. He didn't have a beautiful girl floating along like so many of them did, but he had this little puppy dog there, a little poodle, and the name of his plane was Poopsie. And since he was the general, he probably most likely was leading the missions that he flew. But he was a very brave man. He got his flying license from Orville Wright, and he was a personal friend, as I have in this documents here. He was a personal friend of the person who was named after the bomber I was lately to serve on, and that was Billy Mitchell. And somewhere in the course of my reunions and so forth, the general wrote me a personal letter thanking me for the photographs I was taking and so forth. And this is his photograph on the front of the song that was written, Fly, Air Corps Fly. This is the Bridge Busters. They used to call us the Bridge Busters because of the precision bombing we did. And I was to speak after he passed away in his 90s. I was invited to speak there to help honor him. But the plane is in beautiful condition, and I hope anyone looking at this, and particularly the congressmen and senators from the state of Alabama, I hope all of them will take the time to go by Montgomery and see that. It's beautiful.
Now, a question of a more personal nature. During the time that you were in training in the various places, was it all work and no play?
Oh, you better know it.
You didn't ever get any time off or anything?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir, because we were made aware. You know, that was back then, and we had a very, very highly publicized incident where a navigator got lost, and of course they wound up in the ocean, and they had Eddie Rickenbacker on the boat, the great war hero from World War I. Of course, he was the head of Eastern Airlines, and how they managed to catch a bird that lit on his head, and where they could kill it or eat it or do something. Of course, they had no water to drink and all that, and somebody did find them. But a lot of us joked about it and said, well, the first guy that, if they're cannibals, the first guy they're going to eat is the navigator. And the other one said, no, they probably won't last that long. He'll be the first one to go out swimming in those shark-infested waters, see if he can find another boat somewhere. But anyway, we were all very conscious of that, so we worked hard. Every evening I was out there after dark, matching up stars and this sort of thing, and later on it saved I think on about 2 or 3 occasions, it saved the lives of my crew.
All right, so now we've gotten you to England.
No, I didn't go to England originally.
Where were you going
No.
when you were navigating?
When I graduated on May the 1st, May the 1st was in 1943, and I was still 19 years old. When I graduated from my class, we were given the option of requesting whether to go with the 4-engine bombers out in Tucson, Arizona, or to go to Greenville, South Carolina, because the 57th Bomb Wing had 4 different cities. They were the offshoot of the Tokyo Raiders. And this year's reunion at Indianapolis, Indiana, we're going to have 2 of those Tokyo Raiders present for our next reunion, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be between August the 14th and 19th of this year. But anyway, we
What was your choice then? You had a choice of 14. Which one did you take?
well, they had four bomb groups of the 57th Bomb Wing. They were Walterboro, Florence, Columbia, and Greenville. And I chose to go to Greenville. Of course, my mother's people lived right over the line in North Carolina, and I could go home, which I tried to do as much as I could. But I got my training there, and in November of '43, we had a big ceremony and so forth, and they designed a plane for us, and they built these B-25s with a bit heavier power to destroy targets on the sea. And they put a 75 millimeter cannon right where the pilot normally is. And of course the pilot would be on the right, and he had a little trigger up there. He could fire the cannon. And they put the co-pilot on the left. Later on, that was to be a very fatal situation, because we had only one pilot who had controls. And well, later on, I might mention this, but at that time we had the B-25s with a 75 millimeter cannon. And they put it right in the navigator's compartment, to where I had to hand load the shells, not only find the targets, but also to sink them, because we were going to be assigned in the Mediterranean to tear up enemy shipping. And once we finished our getting our crews together, flying practice missions and so forth, then we all left together. It was before Thanksgiving in '43. We went down a route that went from Greenville to Savannah to West Palm Beach to Puerto Rico to Atkinson Field in British Guiana, and down to Belém, down on the Amazon, and then on down to Natal. Natal was a jumping off place for that little island out in the middle of the Atlantic called Ascension Island. And boy, once you went past the point of no return, you better make sure you find that island. And of course, leaving early in the morning and flying over there from Natal, we had 4 planes that went almost together. The other 3 did not have navigators on them. They had bombardiers on them. So I was the only one. And what we call a sunline landfall, because only at noon, you have only one heavenly body up there. And only at noon, when it crossed from east to west, and we were going, when it crossed over, you could get your course line and your speed line. And the course line wouldn't change very much with the timing, but the speed line was very important. But the course line gave you where you were, because you had to have the lines of position crossing somewhere. And but anyway, we pulled into Liberia, which of course is where all the fuss is now, but back then that's where we made our landfall, in Africa. And we initially went to a place called Philippeville. On the way up there, we stopped at various places like Dakar and Tindouf and Casablanca and so forth, but we went to this place in Algeria called Philippeville. And we pretty much stayed there briefly until we could get a runway built up in Corsica. Corsica was freed, and the Germans were driven out. And what we did is they laid these metal strips for us to land on. And And of course it wasn't solid like being on concrete. Sometimes when you had a bomb load, you'd kind of give a little ripple on your way down and on when you landed. But that's where the 310th Bomb Group of the 57th Bomb Wing was located. We also had other locations like the 340th Bomb, whose planes were, by the way, their planes were destroyed when Mount Vesuvius erupted, and I have some pictures here that indicate that, but we didn't have that experience. We how are we doing over there? Good.
How long did you stay in this place in Corsica, roughly?
Well, we moved up and started flying missions in January. And I was either a lead navigator or an alternate lead. It was common for us to take 36 planes when we went at medium levels, and you'd have a navigator in the lead, and you'd have one following. In case that one got shot down, then they'd all get behind the alternate lead, and that did happen to me on a mission where I took over the lead.
Were you yourself ever shot down?
No, sir. Listen. Wait till you hear this. It's gonna be great, because I'll tell you one thing. I don't consider myself any better navigator than my fellow navigators. There weren't many of us, but one thing about it, B-25s flew close formation. We stayed together. The enemy planes couldn't separate us without running the risk of bumping into one of us, or like the Japanese used that kamikaze tactic later on the B-29s. But over there, the Germans were a little smarter. But if you kept your formation close, they didn't get all separated, where some navigator had to bring them home. And if we had a crippled plane, we could slow down and but stay together, because when we stayed in close, those B-25s at one time were the heaviest armed ships in World War II, or heaviest armed planes. And we, as you can see by my record there, we lost 87 bombers in the 310th group. Now that's 1/4 of the wing. But
was this loss due to ground engagement or air engagement?
Most of it was from Flak. And I was kind of looking to see if I could show you a picture of what a flak looked like on a heavily defended target. And you can't hardly see the planes in there for the smoke. I mean, for the flak.
One other question. You're flying close together, the B-25s are close together. How'd you keep from shooting each other?
Well,
or did you keep from shooting?
Well, if we came in on a say if we're going to sink a ship, we'd come in with when we had 3 ships coming in together. One of them would move from the left over to the right, and then bingo, here he goes. Bingo, here he goes. Here but on one of my earliest missions, we went into a harbor in France, on the French coast, and the Germans were loading up ships to take them down the coast at night to a protected harbor. Now, the first mission that I flew on, we were at medium altitude, and one of the first missions, and we had a ship in a harbor called Piombino in Italy, and this is one of my early missions. And in fact, in my book here, I've got the list of our units that participated in that raid, and of course my name is listed in one of the crews. But we ran had a real strong headwind, and our bomb run was a long bomb run. But we lost our plane, which I recall was just on our wing, and was hit and went down. We tried to get him across the water back to our base in Corsica, but they crashed into the sea and they were killed. But this was of course after we had already changed from being a plane destroying ships. And you'll see in that list of ships that we sank, and one of them was a cruiser, and two others were destroyers along with the other ships. But
excuse me, in order to sink a ship, you got to be pretty close on your bombardier. What type of equipment?
oh no, I didn't.
I know you were a navigator, but how did the bombardier know when to drop the bomb so it would hit that ship?
Well, we flew right into them.
I know, but did you have any kind of sights or
Oh, the pilot had all that. He was, the pilot did the firing.
I thought they had some kind of top secret bomb sighting.
Oh, that's the Norden bomb site.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, no, you didn't use that for that.
Okay.
Later on, we went to medium level, and as soon as, and that's where you really wanted to be precise. And I've got pictures of target photos showing how we grouped our bunch together, and actually it all dropped on one bombardier. Even when we did the mass bombing for the breakout at Anzio, and I was the lead navigator on that one, Little Joe, and we had our squadron commander flying co-pilot. But as we were coming in, the concussion from all those from all the ground fire was pretty heavy. And you said our losses. Yes, we had probably more losses from flak, what they call ground fire, and it got particularly bad as the war went on, when we had to bomb targets at higher elevations, like in the Brenner Pass. The Germans said we couldn't do it. Of course, they could mount their guns up on the hills and on the mountains. It was almost point blank when we came in there, but we destroyed it anyway. We lost a lot of planes doing that, but it was the luck you had. But you had to know what you were doing or where you were going, because let me tell you something. After we lost this plane at a place called Porto San Stefano, where they had a big German ship in there, or German controlled ship, unloading supplies for the Germans to defend Rome down along the Rapido River and so forth. We had a sudden rush over there to take what a lot of people call the killer planes, you know, where you can load the cannon, and we just come in and hit them at the waterline and sink them and this kind of thing. That actually was something the Japanese used in the Pacific War, to give their Zeros more effective firepower. And then when we took the idea and went over to the Mediterranean, where they called us the killer ships, the killer planes. And gosh, I'm getting out of sequence on some of this.
That's what I was fixing to ask. All this time that you were in the Mediterranean, you were still at Corsica.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of my missions, I flew out of this base on Corsica.
That's
yeah.
over a period of how many months or years?
Well, I went home. I left it just about the end of August. My only brother had been killed July the 14th, and I was aware of that. And of course, my mother, being from a broken home, she was there alone, and so forth. And at the time, I had 67 combat missions. My first lead pilot had 50 and went home. He was replaced by another lead pilot after he went home. and then he elected to go home after he had so many missions.
And so you came home to where?
Well, I was shipped back to I came back on the SS Athos II. That was the plane. I came home, and there were a lot of liberated prisoners from Romania and the oil fields and so forth. The Russians had liberated, and I left from Naples and came on that boat all the way back home to New York. And we came by train on down to out here to Fort Mac. And of course, then I got home, and of course, at that time, my brother was still missing in action, presumed dead, he being a fighter pilot. I never knew how he met his death, whether he was shot down by another plane or whatever have you, but they reassigned me on my request to go back to Selman Field at Monroe, Louisiana, to be an instructor. And I guess I was probably one of the youngest instructors there, because I just turned 21, of course, on the 30th of August, and I went to an instructor school and did briefly, and then I did classroom and instruction when I was 21. And
did you get married while you were in service?
No, sir.
Okay.
I didn't.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. No, that would have been well, it's about like when I went to Georgia Tech. I couldn't put somebody through misery like that, because having to keep me up and all that sort of thing. I thought I could go on and get out of Tech as fast as I could, but although I went to commercial high school and didn't have a lot of those subjects that you generally associate with technology and science, I did.
You're in Louisiana, Selman?
At Selman.
How long did you stay there?
Well, in Selman Field, I stayed there until November. Let's see. No, wait a minute. No, I didn't. No, I stayed there until the 45 turned around, and I was hemorrhaging in my spine. I was doing some of all those calisthenics, you might call them, and fall on the ground, teaching how to defend yourself and so forth. And I was hemorrhaging in my spine, and they sent me off to Smyrna, Tennessee, at the Army Hospital there, and it was pretty much an involved situation. But anyway, I had heard about the need for navigators to bring our guys back home, because they were starting, even then they were still taking planes out or bringing them back, and they were paying those guys $7 a day per diem. And I said, I'm in the wrong business. So that's in addition to what your salary was. And back then, that's a lot of money. But anyway, when I got that operation, I made a flight or two with the you might call it, I guess, with them, and then when they announced that they were going to give people discharges based on the number of points they had. Now, Charles, they give you so many points for each decoration you have, for each month that you spend overseas, and that was the bulk of it. But then other factors came in. But I had 98 points, and I had these 6 decorations and so forth. But I elected to go on home and get into school. I was hoping I could get into college with before the winter quarter. In other words, with the winter quarter, where you start in December and you go until March. And I thought about where I'd like to go, and I said, well, if I go to the university and I don't make it, then there's no way I could get into Georgia Tech. But if I go into Georgia Tech and don't make it, I could still go to the university. So that was my logic. But I did work hard, and I completed my requirements, even though I didn't go to the right kind of high school. But I did complete my requirements at Georgia Tech in 2 years and 9 months. And at that time...
Is this on the GI Bill?
The GI Bill, yes, sir. And but I worked part-time the whole time that I was there, working on the employment and trying to get, first of all, we were trying to get returnees back into their jobs and new jobs. And I worked directly under George Griffin, who later on was the Dean of Students there. They called him Mr. Chips. And I went from there, and I was helping Dean Ajax afterward to get out the bulletins, to get recruiters in there, to get our graduates and so forth. But I went on out and went into private life then.
Where were you when on VE Day? Were you still in service?
Let's see, now VE Day, I was, VE Day, I see. Now wait a minute, VJ Day was the last one. VE was the first one. I was still at Monroe on VE Day. On VJ Day,
Monroe where?
Louisiana, at Walker. I mean at Selman Field. Incidentally, there's something I think that the Library of Congress ought to know about Selman Field. We've just recently dedicated a wall there to those students that went through that navigation school. We had about 15,000 of them went there. It was a huge operation because we desperately needed celestial navigators. Of course, we don't need them now. We're on computers. But of those 15,000, we had confirmed deaths on that wall of 1,480. That's virtual, and we had some names that we're still adding. So that's a 10% mortality rate of the navigators.
Was this a college, or was it something the Army
No, we had the school right there on what is now Monroe Airfield, and it was ideally suited for all around it for different types of terrain. We'd do missions over the mountains north of us up in Missouri and so forth, and later on we would take flights even longer than that. But of course, I took a lot of flights to different cities, testing my navigation skills.
Where were you on VJ Day?
I was in St. Joe, Missouri.
And where was that?
And that was where I was based with the Air Transport Command. They were operating out of St. Joe, Missouri.
All right, then you shifted all of a sudden from Bomber Group to ATC.
Yeah, well, see that, no, I didn't, not from Bomber Group, but from navigation school, classroom teaching.
And you went to the ATC. Is
Yeah.
this active, or were you training again?
No, I was just going to do my duty there at moving guys over and moving them back and this sort of thing.
So this had nothing to do with flying then?
No, not flying combat missions. No, I was through with combat, and when I say I had my 67 missions in 2 different places here, one of my declarations said that I flew over 65, and the other one said I flew 67. Actually, just between us, I did actually fly 68, but since we didn't get the target, I didn't count that one. But most all of them, we got our targets. And can I mention something about how I was so lucky and so fortunate there? And I've got to give my instructors in my navigation school a lot of credit for this. But when you fly a medium mission to a specified target and you're about 2 or 3 miles high, you're going to get a lot of flak. of course, the fellows out of England were flying 30,000 feet up. But here we were at anywhere from 12 to 15. And so we were right in their range. But what we had to do was, in planning our missions, you got to get your group together that you're going on the mission, say 36 planes. If you're leading, you're up here in front. You've got an alternate lead that's going to hang along with you. And he doesn't really take over until something happens to you. But first of all, you have to be sure that all your crew have got on the flak helmets and got on the flak jackets. And I used to help my turret gunner, my forward turret gunner, put his, and he's still living, by the way, today. And I'd help him put his jacket on, and we'd get into enemy territory. And I'd be there trying to make sure that the pilots and co-pilot knew where to go. I try to study where we knew there were flak positions and so forth. And I don't know whether the other navigators did this, but any time I knew that there was danger along the way to the target, what I'd do was do a little end around. I'd make a 45-degree turn, a 90-degree turn, get right back on course, another 45. And those poor guys would be shooting at us, and the flak would be all for here on our right or all for here on our left. But somebody said, well, that was killing some time. I said, well, my theory is that we're there to destroy that target and to bring every plane and every man home. And on the missions that I led, I didn't lose a man and I didn't lose a plane.
So you never were shot down?
No, sir.
So you never were a prisoner of
But,
war?
no, sir. But on one mission where I was alternate lead, we did run into some unexpected mobile fire, I think along a railroad track or something, where the Germans had a big gun. And they shot down both of our wingmen. We're flying along here by ourselves. And we had the other planes were already flying up the rest of the 18 planes. And they also knocked out our hydraulic system, where we'd have to belly the plane in on a steel runway, which of course could have sparked up and created some real problems. But fortunately, I being a little eager beaver, I paid attention when they told me about taking the little cover off of the floor that covered up this little mechanism there where they had a little gear there. And they taught me that I could lower the landing gear manually. So on that one we rolled in, but we lost we lost 87 planes in all that experience. But
you weren't on any of them?
Well, now when I said we lost some of them on the missions that I was in. But
I mean, you were not on the plane that went down?
Oh, no, sir. But I attribute that to luck. But anyway, when my second pilot went home and they wanted me to get another one and get started over again, and of course at that time I was still grieving over my only brother, and who was 4 years older than I, and so I don't know. I may be taking too long.
Your primary place of service was in the Mediterranean Italian area.
Yes, sir.
You never did go to England.
Oh no. Some of our units were transferred over to England. I understand that some of them were in Sardinia, and they transferred them over to England later on.
All right. So you graduated from Georgia Tech.
Yes, sir.
When did you get married?
On April 15th, 1950.
Were you back in the Korean service by then?
No, the Korean service, they recalled me to active duty about a year later, in 51, and that's when my first child was born, and she was a Down syndrome.
By the way, what did you retire as? What rank?
Oh, the only promotion I ever got was from second lieutenant to first lieutenant. In fact, if you look at the way this roster of the men on the mission is on there, actually the pilot that I flew over with he was still a second lieutenant, but they made me a first Louis. And that was the only promotion I ever had. I've done the work of colonels, but I don't think it was ever appreciated, even though they sent me even to Bowling Field to see if I could help the manpower management officer, who was a colonel, get his job done. Here I am, a first lieutenant. And then they also sent me down to Hunter Field down here in Georgia. And I went in there. Of course, they had everything all stacked up and everything, but I don't think they knew much about motion and time studies. And you see, that was the thing they taught me at Georgia Tech. But if you didn't go to George Washington University and take their courses, you didn't qualify to be a lieutenant colonel. And so here I was actually doing this stuff and getting it done out there in Roswell, and I could go into that, but that's not part of my World War II experiences.
So you went back into the Korean War then as a first lieutenant?
Oh, I never was anything else.
When did you make second lieutenant?
Well, when I graduated from navigation school, and of course I've got the papers on that.
What was your wife's maiden name?
Her maiden name was Bessie. That's her formal name. Bessie Lucille Walraven.
Is she from the Atlanta area?
Well, she was actually born in St. Louis. Her father was the accountant that set up the General Motors Acceptance Corporation. In other words, they'd help people buy their cars on credit. And she had just come back down to Atlanta from Flint, Michigan. Of course, he was operating up there, and then when he transferred him back to Atlanta near his people. But primarily, her family is closely associated with Atlanta, and her grandmother had a boarding house near the Capitol, and way back then, the legislators used to come and eat their lunch because they could get home cooking there. But my wife is a remarkable person, and she's just, in genealogy, I couldn't hold a candle to her.
How many children did you have?
Had 4.
And you mentioned one of them was Down.
The oldest little girl was the Down syndrome, and she's been the inspiration to my life. And if you want to really see some of the things that I did in the General Assembly I was the one that put through the legislation that required every public building in Georgia to be barrier-free to handicapped people. Now, I know somebody else has been claiming credit for it in a recent election, but it was House Bill 91, and that person wasn't even in the General Assembly when I fought to get it done. And I started out trying to find out why these children couldn't cope in school. And I put through a legislation, and it's not World War II, it's just a few of the things I've done. I've really had a multi-career, I guess, but we had quite a battle on that. In fact, I've got a person here said they'd never seen anybody work so hard to get
How'd you get
something
into
through.
politics?
Because of my daughter, and that handicap, the little, that's what brought me to politics. At one time, before I went to the General Assembly, I was the chairman of the Committee on Special Education in DeKalb County. At one time, I was also chairman of the middle school movement because I thought it was so much of a problem to have seniors and then have these children coming in as freshmen and having them something like 5 years apart or 6 years apart. And I thought we could use our time better and be better qualified to do that. And we eventually went to that system.
Where were you living when you first went to the General Assembly?
At the same place I do now, at 2598 Woodwardia Road out in near Lakeside High School. In fact, my wife and I were at the groundbreaking. That's at Oak Grove Road and Briarcliff Road, where they come together.
So you were in DeKalb County?
In DeKalb County, yes, sir.
And you served how long in the General Assembly?
30 years, 10 years in the House, and 20 years in the Senate. You can see in a lot of my documentation here, well, it's more in the black one. In my documentation, some of the things that I've done here, I had some national and international awards. Although I was being a Republican, I never had a street named after me or a building or anything like that. And somebody wanted to know if I wanted an intersection named after me, and I said no. I said, when I recruit the volunteers to ring those Salvation Army bells and they have to stand at the door, I said they have to look out and they have to see those lined spaces out there reserved for people who are disabled and can park. They can see the curb cuts out there where they can get a wheelchair up there and go in by themselves and so forth. And I said that's all over Georgia. And I said, why should I name an intersection after me? But I did a lot of speaking with United Way, and of course I do have quite an honor there. For 2 years running, I was the #1 request in Atlanta. But people were accusing me, well, you're in politics. And I said, okay, I'll deal with that. I said, from now on, I won't accept a speaking engagement to talk about, I had a simple message, but I said, I don't want it in my district. So here I had to go to other places to speak because I didn't want them to say, well, he was campaigning.
Now you are still active in your group after you're discharged.
Yes, sir. At the
You'll go to reunions.
at the Omaha reunion, I was installed as the for the following year as the president of the Bomb Wing Association, and then I'm right now I'm serving as a parliamentarian for the group. I mean for the wing, and of course my little squadron. I have my pilot that we flew to Ascension Island together is still alive, but he's got Parkinson's disease. So I don't know how long he'll be, and but anyway, he named one of his big sons after me. That's it. This is that huge sun right here in the picture. But if you had come to my office in the Capitol, I sort of made it sort of like a little war room there, and I was working with a lot of problems the state was having, but the lieutenant governor, being of the opposite party, wouldn't even put me on the scientific committee, and my other Republican had been its first chairman of that. How's our time running?
We've got about 7 minutes, is that correct? About 7 minutes.
Wow, you better ask a lot of questions.
Was there anything unusual during the time that you were in service? Anything unusual that happened to you that's a special note that you remember?
Well, I had an ugly incident happen. I wish it had not happened, but I've pondered over this a long time. But when I got out of the hospital with my spinal operation, they sent me home for about a week to recover. And of course, it was a very delicate thing, and even a hard bump, I could have bled to death. But I got jumped on the streets of Atlanta by 3 Army personnel from down at Fort Gillem, and they threatened to knock me through a plate glass window and all. And of course, the fellow was about twice my size. He found out later he was from Virginia. But of course, I was in no condition to fight, and I didn't want to go begging for any, because he of course had a passionate distaste of people who were officers. And God knows what little officer I was. But anyway, I was small enough, and he was court-martialed. But I finally, people were just standing around. Nobody would come to help me. Of course, I didn't even let them know I had just gotten out of the hospital, but I couldn't have done anything. But I thought that was bad that we would let stuff like that going on in the streets for people like us that had already been over there and back, and all that, and the disrespect they had.
Do you think you came out of the service better or worse than you were when you went in?
Oh, I came out far better. It gave me a lot of perspective about a lot of things. And even now, I think if you look at my career in the Georgia General Assembly, I know that that I had, as one of the persons said that congratulated me on getting some of my legislation through that just completely changed the lives of people. And that's what I was there for. I'm a change agent. And if you got problems with teaching kids in school, well, look and see what the problem is.
But this all came about your personal experience after the war.
Well, this was brought about by the fact that we had this tragedy of having a Down syndrome child. And in my speeches for United Voicer, I said there are two kinds of people in this world. It's like two sides of a coin. I said those that give and those that receive. And I said only the people who give have the choice. But actually, in making the choice, it so enriches their life, because then they do something that makes their life worthwhile. And they always used to say, like all this big board of accountants wanted me to come and speak to them over there one day, and they had a whole room full of people, and they said, Joey says, give that coin speech. And
that's your gospel.
that was my, well, and the years that I spoke, in fact, both years that I was really out front, that I think I was #1 speaker in the city for 2 years. But we had this combined federal employees, about 3,000 people, and I spoke to them. And on another occasion, they had 2 hangar loads of people as far as you could see at Delta Airlines. And Delta just, they were really wonderful to me, and because they were particularly pleased that since 1957 I was a Delta flying colonel and had signature of the founder of the airline on it.
Now that you're retired, how do you spend your time? Or are you retired?
Well, I get called on to a lot of people to help, and right now I'm trying to give a Navy veteran whose wife spent $65,000 a year last year, trying to keep him in the Bud facility out there in the Emory. And she's run out of money and everything, and she's mortgaging her home and everything else. She says, can you please get me some help from the VA? And right now, that's one of my things. I'm trying to do what I can and plead with someone who is in office, because I can no longer, since I've been out this past January when someone was sworn in to succeed me. And I feel sort of helpless, and I'm frustrated because I can't help people like I wish I could. But if you'll look at these documents and so forth, if you have time to see the many areas that this world has been changed because I went this way. And that's what is more important to me than even my own life.
Okay, that's about it.